Have you ever wondered why your songs don't have that punch or power or groove compared to your favorite songs, even after years of producing music?
This is why I can't do it. I can't do them.
You search and search, hoping to find at least one tutorial that will tell you exactly what it is that you need to do. But your searching ends up in vain, and all seems hopeless.
Oh my God, I'm done. Oh God, fuck. Oh my God.
Well, fear not anymore, because today is the day when you finally can take your music to the next level. Good samples can help, but that is not the key to achieving a powerful sound. It's really about compression, and more specifically, multiband compression. Compression seems to be the hardest concept for beginner and intermediate producers to fully understand, let alone utilize to its full potential. So in this video, I'm going to show you just how easy it is to use a multiband compressor. Of course, the greatest tool in your music-making arsenal are your ears. But I've developed a process where you don't have to have impeccable hearing or years of experience in order to get the perfect mix and master. Instead, you primarily just need math. After all, music is sound and sound is frequency, and frequency is represented by numbers.
Is math related to science?
Math is the language of the universe.
Numbers.
So in this video, I'm going to teach you some advanced mixing and mastering techniques that I have never seen anyone talk about before. And don't worry, the math is very simple.
Boom.
This process also works with any kind of music too. So let's get started. First, always make sure to start with gain staging by anchoring the kick, which means setting the volume of the kick and mixing around it, since you want the kick to be the loudest instrument usually. I just leave it at 0 and make sure all your samples are normalized too. Okay, let's get into the fun stuff. Well, almost. So here we have a simple 8-bar loop that is in 126 BPM. Now the first step in my mixing process is to figure out what the note lengths are of the particular song in milliseconds. We will use these time lengths for everything that has to do with numbers such as the attack and release times. So we just need to do two simple equations using the BPM. The first equation is BPM over 60 to get the beats per second. So 126 divided by 60, which is 2.1 beats per second. Then we need to determine the duration of each beat with the equation of 1 over the beats per second. So 1 divided by 2.1. For this song, we end up with a beat duration of 0.47619 yada seconds, or 476.19 milliseconds. This number is the foundation of all the other numbers we will use in our mixing and mastering. So then we will multiply this number by 4 and get 1904.76, which is the equivalent length of a bar. We will repeat this process 2 more times, and then we will go back and divide 476 by 4, and repeat that process, but with division. So now we've made a list of all the relevant note lengths we will use. Now let's go over the numbers in this list, as this next concept is very important. Because if you put a number in a wrong spot, whether that be a band frequency or a compressor attack and release, it will make your whole song dissonant and can actually give you a headache, at least for me. So a good way to imagine this next concept is to think about the kick and the snare and how they are placed in a song. The kick is mainly on a downbeat and the snare on an upbeat. It would sound very weird to have the snares on the downbeat and the kicks on the upbeat, right? So that is how you should imagine these numbers as. Can you guess which numbers would be our downbeats? Yes, it would be 476, and the numbers I have to the left, and the snare numbers are to the right. So now that we have our list in order, let's set up our multiband compressor. For this process, we will need 5 frequency bands. So first, let's add a multiband compressor to the master and set it to peak mode. I always turn off soft knee too, because it has a cleaner sound. Then we will group it and duplicate it 4 times. Now let's start by setting the frequency bands by using the numbers from the list we made. We will start with the low band and set the crossover to 119 and solo it. This is our low band. Then we'll go to the above compressor and set the low crossover to 119 and the high crossover to 476 and solo the mid band. This is our low mid band. We will move up to the next compressor and set the low crossover to 476 and the high crossover 1904 and solo the mid band. This is our mid band. Next compressor, low crossover to 1904, high crossover to 7619 and solo the mid band. This is our high mid band. And finally, the last compressor, set the high crossover to 7619 and solo the high band. This is our high band. Now that we have our frequency bands, let's set the thresholds. For the low band, set it to -18 decibels. For the low mid band, also set it to -18 decibels. Then set the mid band to -24 decibels, and the mid high to -24 decibels, and the high band to -30 decibels. Remember, these numbers only work if you have your kick normalized and set to 0 decibels. Okay, next let's set the ratios. For the low band, set it to 2. For the low mid and mid bands, set them to 1.5. And set the mid high and high bands to 1.25. Remember, these numbers only work if you have your kick normalized and set to 0 decibels. Can you see the pattern we got going on here? These are my personal preferences, and you can change it up depending on how much compression you want. But be careful, because if you do change the threshold or ratio, they need to be set to parameters that do not leave the pattern of ratios that I have here. So basically, the ratios need to be half of the previous from low to high. And if you want to change the threshold, it needs to be in increments of 12 decibels. Because if the numbers aren't in perfect mathematical harmony with each other, then it will make your sound dissonant, which I will explain why later. But first, let's set the attack and release parameters. We'll refer to the list one more time for these. For the low band, set the attack to 476 and the release to 119. Now, let's skip the low mid for a moment and set the mid band attack to 119 and the release to 29.8. Okay, so back to the low mid band. To get the attack, we will use the average of the low band and mid band attack time. So add 476 plus 119, which is 595, and divide that by 2 to get 297.5 for the low mid band attack time. And we will do the same for the release. 119 plus 29.8 is 149, and divide that by 2 to get 74.5. Now, let's go all the way up to the high band and set that first before we do the high mid band. Set the attack to 29.8 and the release to 7.44. And finally, for the high mid band, 119 plus 29.8 is 149, and divide that by 2 to get 74.5. And for the release, 29.5 plus 7.44 is 126, and divide that by 2 to get 18.47. Okay, everything is set up. Now let's see the difference it's made with our song. I'll adjust the output gains to compensate for the compression off camera for time's sake. But this is the hardest part, because just 1/100th of a decibel makes a huge difference. Okay, here is without. And here it is with. And that's what a perfectly compressed loop sounds like.
Nice.
Much more powerful and the perfect attack, release, band separation and ratios really make it feel so amazing and harmonious, since the compressor is compressing with the timing of the song perfectly.
Perfection.
And since I have your attention, let me show you what it sounds like with my full master chain added to the loop. Here's before. And here's with my full master chain.
Yeah, boy.
Before we wrap up, we need to return to the point I mentioned earlier about how the numbers need to be mathematically harmonious with each other. Remember how I mentioned how you need to adjust the threshold in increments of 12 dB? For some reason, 12 is a very special number in audio engineering, and if you change the threshold to any other increment, the sound will become very unpleasant, especially if you increase or decrease by 6. Which I won't demonstrate here because it really does bother my brain. Seriously, be very careful with this. It has to do with sound phasing, and if you do it wrong, it can turn the sound from very euphoric to downright painful. This also applies to the ratios as well. So again, be very careful. Alrighty, well I hope this video was enjoyable and that you learned a thing or two. As I said earlier, I have never seen anyone talk about the methods I've shown you today, so I could be totally wrong or crazy, or was just unaware of them. But I definitely think it makes an improvement, and the math makes sense to me. If you have learned anything new and useful, let me know by leaving a like and comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts about my mixing technique. Maybe I'll make additional tutorials if I get enough demand for it. There are many more tips and tricks I can show you, such as expanding on the process you just learned about, show you my equalization techniques, or even FM synthesis techniques that I've also never seen anyone talk about before. Subscribe so you don't miss out. You can listen to a fully mixed and mastered song of mine in the link below. And if you can't wait until a next video, I offer music production lessons from beginner to advanced that are very reasonably priced. If you're interested, send me an email, which is in the link below in the video description box. I guarantee that I can improve your music production in no time. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep making music.